So when I was a little girl, every chance I got, I would cut out across the field between my house and my grandparents. First, I would check in with Mama at the house, see what was going on, but usually I'd end up out in the field or picking up eggs or tending to the cows with Pawpaw. But hands down, my favorite time on the farm was baling hay. Papa would go off to Booker Lane and come back with a truck full of extra workers. My cousins and their friends would show up, and we would be off hauling hay. It was kind of like this slow parade through the fields. The guys on the ground would pick up the square hay bales and toss them up to the stackers in the trailer. And I'd be right there in the middle of it all, totally mesmerized by this orchestrated dance and dreaming about the Pop Rouge and cold watermelon we'd have when we were done. Now, on one of those summer days when I think I was about 8 years old, I know I wasn't 9 yet because Mama was making a cake that morning, and she had passed away when I was 9, so I think I'm about 8 years old, and I am tagging along as usual. We're in the back field by the catfish pond, over where there's this dip in the field that runs kind of sideways towards the fence. And Pawpaw hops off the tractor and says he needs me to drive for him. I'm 8 years old. I don't know how to drive. But my Pawpaw has this easy way about him that just makes you want to do whatever he says. So I hop up on that tractor like I belong there. Now, I've got to scooch to the edge of the seat just to reach the pedals, and I'm sure I had to stand up to make the clutch go all the way in. With Pawpaw's easy instructions, I got that tractor moving on the very first try. It was brilliant. Until I got to that little dip and stalled the tractor, and then everything came to an abrupt stop. Now, fast forward with me to the summer of 2020. I'm 51 years old sitting in my therapist's office, and I'm having a moment. I had started seeing him 3 years before during the Great Divide. That's what I call my divorce. When it became obvious that this marriage was over, I just thought, I'll get on with the new path, right? Yeah, it's gonna be hard, but look, I've been making my own way since I was 18 years old, and I've spent my entire life being independent and pragmatic, and this time would be no different. But it was. Somewhere over the years of just everyday life, the doubt had set in, totally unperceived by me. And now that I needed to summon, like really summon the full force of this independent, over-prepared, I can do anything I want to do person, she wasn't there. And I couldn't find her. Every step forward that I took, I felt like Charlie Brown lining up to kick that football, you know, where at the last minute it gets pulled out and you land flat on your back. There I was, flat on my back, over and over and over again. And on this particular day, sitting with my therapist, I wondered out loud to him, I wondered if maybe we get one chance at a big, full life, and maybe I'd used mine up. He looked at me and said something like, Denise, I was sitting right here across from you when it all started, and you were devastated. You are a different person now. And then he listed all the hard things that I had done. And he reminded me that this wasn't just a divorce, and it wasn't just a betrayal. This was 3 long, hard years of chaos and messes not of my making being dropped on my doorstep for me to sort through and clean up. Now, before I go on, I want you to understand something about Allie, my therapist. He doesn't coddle, and this man does not sugarcoat anything. He is a truth teller. And not once has he ever said anything to me just to make me feel better. So as I'm listening to him name the trauma and go through this laundry list of my triumphs, I dared believe that maybe that big, full life that I'd been trying so hard to build, maybe it was still ahead of me. That day, Allie gave me a writing assignment, and in that assignment, I was reminded of being 8 years old on my grandfather's farm. Now, when I stalled that tractor, I looked over at Pawpaw sure that I had totally blown my one chance. He never even took one step towards me. He just kindly walked me through it. So I slowly released the clutch while pushing forward on the power lever just enough to get that tractor out of the dip and moving forward. And the guys started hauling hay again. Now, little Denise, 8 years old out in that field, she is surrounded by men and teenage boys who are very impatiently sitting in the Louisiana sun waiting on her. And she is unfazed. I remember it's the first time that I ever felt like, I can do anything. So after that day in Allie's office, I started seeing glimpses of little 8-year-old Denise return. An 18-year-old Denise who would drive 12 hours alone from Louisiana to Kentucky in her little Datsun 210 station wagon with the AM radio, long before cell phones and GPS. 22-year-old who took her first international trip solo. And of the woman who had doubled her salary 3 times in 10 years, had helped build companies, and competed in a dozen triathlons. But being the one who just knew was a really hard knot to unravel. Just knew, let me explain that. Those were his words. It was 3 weeks after he had announced on the phone from 400 miles away that he no longer wanted to be married. And we were standing in the garage, and he's trying to explain to me, trying to convince me that it was not his responsibility to have told me he was unhappy. He looked at me and said, "You always know. I count on you to know, and you should have known." In those 3 little sentences, he pretty much summed up our almost 3 decades together. It had always been on me to know, to figure out, to make things right. And it turns out that that is a really hard habit to break. Being the one that always figures it out. Now, I could not have predicted what was going to happen next. It's August 22nd, 2020. It is raining so hard that I have pulled off the road into the parking lot of this little convenience store. And as it's this off 290 out in Johnson City, I'm sitting there and waiting for the rain to let up. And my phone rings. Hello? Is this Denise Cornell? Yes. Have you spoken to Charles recently? Yes. Do you know where he is? Yes. He asked me to call you for the $1,000 retainer I need to start on his release. I knew exactly where he was because I had been his one call at 3 a.m. that morning. Not his girlfriend, not his parents, not a friend, me. Now, like I said, I could not have predicted the specifics of this call, but I could have scripted with amazing accuracy my response. So as I am about to reflexively say yes and whip out my credit card, I can already feel the indignation rising in my throat. How dare you call me to fix this? And I caught it and paused and politely declined that attorney's request. Sitting in my living room that night, I was waiting for the guilt to set in. It didn't. I actually felt good about my decision to say no, because I had said no for me, not out of revenge, not out of spite, and I didn't leave him hanging. I got him the help he needed, just not for me. And sitting there, I thought, this is what it feels like to choose yourself. And just like 8-year-old Denise, I was back in the driver's seat.